Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a stubborn Texas farmer refuses to bow to a smug HOA president, a quiet boundary dispute explodes into sabotage, arson, and a full-blown legal war. What they didn't count on. Matt Harper fights back with grit, drones, and 1,000 acres of unstoppable resolve. My name's Matt Harper, 42 years old, third-generation farmer, and stubborn enough to outlast Texas heat waves, government inspections, and the occasional wild boar chewing through irrigation lines. I inherited 1,000 acres of land from my father, who got it from his father. We don't lease, we don't subdivide, and we sure as hell don't join HOAs. My land stretches wide across the county line, rolling pastures, a patch of oak woods, 3 creeks that flood in spring, and one busted-up fishing shack that I'll fix one of these days. Like I've been saying for 10 years, I work sun up to sundown, sometimes alone, sometimes with a couple of hands when the crops demand it. I mind my business, keep my fences mended, and let the city folk play golf on the other side of the ridge. That was the deal. They stay on their side, I stay on mine. At least, it was, until Randall Jameson showed up. The man drove onto my land in a white BMW with windows so dark I thought the Secret Service had arrived, stepped out like he was hosting a press conference, grinning like a rattlesnake in a 3-piece suit. Polished loafers in a pasture, mind you. I already didn't trust him. He introduced himself as the new president of the Southwind Pines Homeowners Association. Never heard of it, neither had I. Apparently, some ritzy subdivision that butts up against my southern property line had elected Randall their crown prince of beige conformity and backyard yoga ordinances. He came offering unity, his words, not mine, and slid a glossy folder across my truck's tailgate like he was pitching a timeshare. Mr. Harper, with your cooperation, we'd like to extend our community to include your land. You'd gain all the benefits of our HOA, security, beautification standards, community events. I cut him off, told him I didn't need bunting, bylaws, or someone else telling me how high my grass should grow. He didn't even flinch, just smiled wider, leaned in a little too close, and said the words that, to this day, hang framed on my kitchen wall. If you don't become part of the HOA, your farm will simply cease to exist. I thought he was bluffing. Turns out Randall doesn't bluff. He plays dirty. And I was about to find out just how dirty. At first, I laughed it off. Really, I did. I figured Randall was just another overconfident HOA suit trying to throw his weight around. Maybe he'd get bored once he realized I wasn't some lonely retiree desperate for block parties and trash bin color codes. But a week after our little chat, things started going sideways. It began with the irrigation system. I came out one morning, coffee in hand, ready to check on the drip lines running through the east pasture, and my main pump was dead. Not faulty, not broken down from age. No, someone had taken a wrench, or maybe a crowbar to it, and ripped it apart like they were gutting a deer. Pipes split, connectors gone, bolts missing. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. They didn't destroy the whole thing, just enough to stop water from reaching the soy fields without setting off an obvious alarm. That repair cost me $8,000 and a lost week of watering. I was irritated, but I told myself maybe it was vandalism. Kids, bored teens, maybe. Then came the letters. 2 in 1 week, both from the Department of Agriculture. Anonymous complaints filed against me. Suspected misuse of fertilizer, hazardous runoff, risk to local water table. Words straight out of bureaucratic hell. Next thing I know, I've got 2 inspectors in khaki pants and clipboards walking my fields like they're hunting for a crime scene. They didn't find anything, of course. I've been running this place cleaner than a church kitchen since the 90s, but even clean inspections come with paperwork, delays, stress, and a reputation stain I didn't ask for. And then, as if someone wanted to put a cherry on top, my insurance premium mysteriously tripled, flagged for ongoing risk concerns. Gee, I wonder how that happened. And then came the fire. It was 2:17 a.m. I know because I was up late fixing a spreadsheet for feed inventory. Heard a crack, then a bang. I ran out to find the old equipment shed, Dad's first tool shed, with the rusted Massey Ferguson under a tarp, lit up like the 4th of July. Flames licking the sky, smoke thick as black paint. The volunteer fire crew got there in time to stop it from spreading, thank God. But the shed, gone. Melted, warped, ash. The official report? Undetermined cause. But the sheriff leaned in and muttered, "Matt, that didn't start itself. And it didn't start natural." This wasn't petty anymore. This was a pattern. And someone who didn't like hearing no, was trying to bleed me dry from the shadows. But here's the thing. I'm not built to be bled out. I don't fold. I patch up the holes, tighten my boots, and plant twice as deep. And right about the time I was patching fences and rechecking locks, I noticed something else, something that didn't make sense. Little signs. Literally. Down by the southern fence line, where the fields brush up against that cookie-cutter neighborhood, I spotted a few metal boundary markers, fresh paint, HOA logos, installed at odd angles, as if someone had quietly redrawn my property line while I wasn't looking. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just sabotage. This was encroachment. They weren't just trying to pressure me into joining them. They were moving in already, as if I didn't exist. And I knew. It was time to measure what was mine. The next morning, I called up Tommy Delgado, a licensed surveyor who'd done work for my dad back in the day. Still had the same beat-up Ford. Still wore his Texas Longhorns cap backward like a teenager. He showed up with a drone, GPS rig, and a half smile that said, "Let's see what they messed up." We started at the old markers, original stone posts buried in concrete from my grandfather's time. Tommy checked the deeds, the historical surveys, even pulled archived county maps from a thumb drive like some kind of digital cowboy. And then he got quiet. Real quiet. I hate that kind of quiet. Finally, he looked up and said, "Matt, you ain't gonna like this. Rough math says they're about 300 acres deep into your land." I blinked. "What do you mean deep?" "I mean clubhouse, pond, parking lot, walking trails, part of 6 homes. All of it sits smack on your property. Not near the line, not brushing it, on it. These folks didn't just tiptoe over your fence. They pitched tents and built castles. It was like someone had hit me in the chest with a shovel. I couldn't believe it. For years, while I was busy running a real business with tractors and cows and drought-resistant corn, these HOA folks had been quietly inching over the line. I hadn't noticed because the southern stretch of my land was more pasture than plowed, mostly left wild, just deer trails and a couple old oaks. They must have figured I'd never bother checking, that I was too busy, too country, too unaware. I drove straight to the edge of the encroachment, parked at the top of the ridge, and stared down at their gleaming monument to entitlement. Manicured lawns, a damn sauna with Bluetooth speakers, children playing by a pond that by every square foot of record belonged to me. They'd literally built their HOA paradise on my land. Now look, land disputes happen, property lines get fuzzy, but you don't build 6 houses, a clubhouse, a pond, and pave a parking lot without knowing where the hell the line is. This wasn't an accident. This was orchestrated. And guess who I saw walking out of that clubhouse like he was Caesar returning from conquest? Randall Jameson. In loafers again, holding a clipboard. I honked once. He turned, squinted, and gave me a lazy wave like we were old pals. Then, get this. He pointed to my truck and made a circle with his finger, mouthing, "Please don't park there, Matt. HOA traffic zone." I swear, I almost drove straight through their bougie mailbox row. Instead, I got out, walked down, calm, straight shoulders. "Randall," I said, "we need to talk." He flashed that smug grin. "About what?" I handed him a printed map, Tommy's overlay of my deed lines and their construction. "This isn't just bad surveying. You've built your kingdom on my land." Randall didn't even blink. He looked at the map, tilted his head, then folded it neatly and tucked it into his vest pocket like a dinner menu. "Well," he said, "you should have spoken up sooner." Then he leaned in real close, like he wanted to whisper a bedtime story. "Look, Matt, if you start making noise about this, we'll have the county reclassify your southern acres as abandoned rural parcel. Once that happens, municipal law lets us annex the territory for community use. We've got lawyers. We've got friends on the zoning board. We are the future. You're dust." That was the moment I realized what I was facing wasn't just arrogance. It was a calculated land grab. HOA style. And that night, standing on my own porch holding a deed that said I owned that pond and those houses and that sauna, I made a decision. No more warnings, no more neighborly chats. It was time to fight. And I was going to fight like a man with 3 generations of dirt under his fingernails. Because this land was mine. After Randall's threat, I spent exactly one sleepless night staring at the ceiling, my fists clenched like I was ready to wrestle the drywall. I've dealt with coyotes, droughts, busted harvests, and even an IRS audit once, but nothing prepared me for the smug gall of a man who thought a sauna gave him more legal standing than a deed. So I started prepping, not for court, not yet, for war. The next morning, I reinforced my fences. Every foot of southern boundary got barbed wire, fresh signage, and trail cameras with night vision. I bought extra motion lights, linked my cameras to my phone, and trained my dog, Bella, a 90-pound blue heeler, to bark at anything whiter than a chicken and carrying a clipboard. And just in time, too. 2 nights later, my phone pinged at 3:48 a.m. The cameras caught 2 masked men slicing through my southern fence line. They didn't even try to be subtle, just hopped through, snuck along the tree line, and disappeared into the HOA zone. I called the sheriff. They showed up an hour later, took a report, said they'd keep an eye out. Right. The next morning, I found my entire south pasture gate hanging off its hinges, clean cuts through the steel bolts. And one of my cows, Lulu, my prize milker, was lying motionless, foam at her mouth. Vet said it was intentional poisoning. Something slipped into the water trough. She barely survived. I didn't sleep for 2 days, hand-fed her with a bottle while fire danced behind my eyes. And then, as if Randall wanted to make his message even clearer, it got worse. On the 3rd day, I woke to the smell of burning diesel. My John Deere seeder was on fire. Someone had lobbed a glass bottle filled with gasoline and a dirty rag through the barn window. The Molotov cocktail melted $80,000 worth of machinery in under 10 minutes. And on the wall, spray painted in bold white paint like some HOA battle cry, "Move or burn." That was it. I called every contact I had. My cousin who worked with a legal co-op in Houston, an old buddy from school who flew mapping drones, a journalist I once helped during a wildfire. I didn't just go for help, I launched a counteroffensive. See, I know how these people operate. They smile. They hold pancake breakfasts. But under that is control, the HOA cult of uniformity. If you don't fit the mold, they'll squeeze you until you either conform or collapse. Not me. I started by filing official complaints, not with the HOA, but with the county recorder, zoning department, fire marshal, USDA, and every agency that's ever given a damn about land abuse. I sent them maps, pictures, drone footage, incident reports, even Lulu's vet pills. Then I installed 2 huge banners at the edge of my southern field, white on red block letters, 15 feet across. This is private land. Trespassers will be prosecuted. You are not in the HOA. You are in Texas. Randall drove by that afternoon, rolled down his window, smiled. "You're escalating things, Matt." I smiled right back. "No, Randall, I'm just matching your energy." Later that week, I heard from one of my hands that HOA members were whispering about legal land transition and community safety threats. They were preparing a public campaign to have my southern land declared neglected, so the county could seize it via eminent domain and protect their development. It was official. I wasn't dealing with neighbors anymore. I was dealing with corporate suburbia in pastel polos. So I suited up. I filed a lawsuit, a big one, and I filed a police report for arson, poisoning of livestock, criminal trespass, and malicious vandalism. And while the legal gears began to turn, I did one more thing, the one move Randall didn't expect. I called the media. See, rich people don't like the spotlight when it's not curated. And when I gave the Dallas Tribune my story, along with drone shots of Randall sipping Chardonnay in a hot tub on my land, the fire wasn't just in my barn anymore. It was in their clubhouse. This war wasn't over. But now I had their attention. I've never been much for paperwork. I don't enjoy suits, I don't talk in legalese, and my idea of a good day involves diesel dirt and maybe a cold beer on the porch. But I also know this. You don't bring a garden rake to a gunfight. Randall and his HOA may have lawyers and zoning board cronies, but I had something they didn't. Facts, firepower, and a whole lot of pissed-off motivation. So I lawyered up. I hired Paige Monroe, a no-nonsense property rights attorney from Austin. She showed up in boots and a blazer, hair in a bun, and eyes like twin hunting rifles. After hearing my story, she didn't ask if we had a case. She asked how big. I wanted to make it. We got to work. Paige filed a civil lawsuit for illegal land encroachment, seeking full transfer of any structures built on my land into my ownership. She also filed a request for temporary injunction to halt any further development or use of those areas by HOA members. At the same time, we compiled a package of criminal evidence for the sheriff's office: attempted arson, animal poisoning, and destruction of agricultural equipment. While she worked the courts, I called in my crew, not just farmhands, specialists. First came Tommy Delgado, my surveyor, who returned with drone flyovers and thermal imagery, showing not just construction, but active utility lines running from HOA power to buildings on my land. Then came Josh Sinclair, an investigative journalist with the Dallas Tribune. I handed him a manila folder thicker than a Baptist hymn book, complete with timestamps, security footage, HOA emails, leaked anonymously, bless whoever did that, and a video clip of Randall telling his landscapers, "Just move the fence 10 feet over. Old McDonald won't notice." Oh, but McDonald noticed. Then came the public fallout. Josh's expose ran in the Sunday edition with the headline, "Suburban Paradise Built on Stolen Soil. How an HOA Crossed the Line, Literally." There was a photo of Randall holding a glass of wine next to a fire pit, one that stood neatly inside the boundary of my land. By Monday morning, county officials were being bombarded with calls. The HOA board went into lockdown. Randall's smug little grin vanished, replaced with a PR firm and a series of backpedaling statements: misunderstanding, clerical error, respect for rural partnerships. Paige, meanwhile, filed an amended complaint after discovering forged consent letters, documents supposedly from me giving the HOA permission to develop shared amenities. They had my name, but the signature, office sloppy, like someone tried to imitate a signature from a check and forgot I don't loop my H's. She held it up in court like a trophy. "Your Honor, not only did the defendant trespass and build illegally, they forged consent and submitted it to the county for permitting. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is fraud." And the judge? Oh, the judge didn't like fraud. We got a court order allowing me immediate inspection access to every square foot of the encroached property. I walked through their clubhouse with a deputy by my side and taped blue painter's X's on everything that sat on my land. Pool chairs, pergolas, even the koi pond. One HOA board member asked me what I was doing. I smiled, just labeling what's about to be mine. But I wasn't done. I sent formal demand letters to the 6 families whose homes partially overlapped my property. I didn't threaten eviction. I'm not a monster, but I made it clear, if the courts ruled in my favor, they'd either pay fair market lease rates or move fences and structures. One man offered me a bottle of bourbon to forget it happened. I said, "You offering a barrel? Otherwise, it's going to court." And then, silence. Weeks passed. Depositions began. Randall tried everything, claimed administrative error, blamed a former developer, even hinted I was harassing the community. But the paper trail was undeniable. I may not wear a tie, but I had receipts. They wanted war. I gave them rural litigation warfare, hay-scented, steel-toed, and completely by the book. And now, the court date was set. All the chess pieces were on the board. Next move, checkmate. The courthouse smelled like stale coffee and old linoleum, exactly the kind of place where you hope reason still has a fighting chance. I showed up in a pressed shirt, jeans that didn't have grease on them, miracle, and my best boots. Not to impress the judge, just to remind everyone that I wasn't here to play politics. I was here to defend what was mine. Paige walked in beside me, calm as a lake before a storm. Randall came in the opposite door wearing a charcoal suit so stiff it looked like it was still on the hanger. He nodded at me like we were about to sit through a parent-teacher conference, not a land rights showdown that could bankrupt his HOA. The trial lasted 4 days, long days. Days filled with paper exhibits, digital maps, drone footage, and a parade of witnesses that ranged from county clerks to the guy who accidentally ran my fence down during a HOA-sponsored trail expansion. Paige opened strong. She painted the timeline, how they started edging onto my property, quietly redrawing lines, submitting forged documents, and constructing on my land without permits or permission. She introduced video of Randall instructing contractors to just push the line a bit farther. You could hear his voice clear as day, laughing about how old Harper wouldn't know until it was too late. Then came the real bombshell. Page presented a 5-year sequence of satellite images month by month, showing the creeping expansion of HOA infrastructure over the border. It was like watching suburban mold grow in time-lapse, swallowing up my southern acres like a buffet. Randall's lawyer objected, something about context, intentions, cooperative development. The judge leaned forward and asked, "Are you suggesting that your client didn't know whose land he was building on?" There was a pause so thick you could plant corn in it. Randall tried to speak for himself later. He went for charm, talked about community values, shared vision, how he admired my rustic stewardship, and only wanted to enhance the region's cohesion. Page stood up, and with the calm of a woman holding a lit match near gasoline said, "Did this admiration begin before or after Mr. Jameson filed a county motion to declare Mr. Harper's land as abandoned rural tract for annexation?" Cue silence. The crowd, yes, there was a crowd by now, locals and reporters alike, shifted in their seats like they smelled something foul. Then I took the stand. I told them what it was like, waking up to sabotage, watching my cow nearly die, seeing 30 years of peace on my land dissolve into fence cutting, fire, and fake paperwork. I didn't shout, didn't cry, just laid it out like I was reporting on a bad harvest. When Page asked me, "Why fight this so hard?" I said, "Because when someone tries to take your land without asking, you don't compromise. You plant your feet and say, 'This far, no further.'" The jury deliberated for just under 2 hours. When they came back in, their faces were set. The foreman stood and read the verdict. In favor of the plaintiff, Matthew Harper, on all counts. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for 4 damn months. The judge's ruling was even better than we'd hoped. Full transfer of all HOA-built structures on my land into my ownership, effective immediately. A $1.2 million fine levied against Southwind Pines HOA for property damage, illegal construction, and emotional distress. Randall Jameson convicted on 3 counts: criminal trespass, falsification of documents, and attempted fraud, 3 years probation, 10-year ban from any HOA leadership roles. I glanced over at Randall. His face had finally lost that smug showroom shine. He looked like a man who had just realized he bet the house and lost the land beneath it. Page leaned in and whispered, "Told you justice still works, especially when you bring a drone." Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Journalists, neighbors, even a few quiet HOA members who gave me sheepish nods. One woman from Lot 17 actually handed me a homemade pie and said, "I didn't know, Mr. Harper. I really didn't. I'm sorry." I took the pie. I'm not petty, but I did tell her that rent invoices would be arriving soon. Victory, as it turns out, tastes like apple crumble. But I wasn't done yet, because if they thought I was going to just walk away with a signature and a settlement, they hadn't met my kind of farmer. I had one more move left, and it was gonna make history. The ink on the verdict wasn't even dry when I took my first stroll through the now former HOA clubhouse, which, as of that court order, belonged to me. There's something deeply satisfying about walking through a polished marble lobby in muddy boots, especially when a members only sign squeaks under your heel as you kick it aside. First order of business. I converted the community fitness suite into my personal gym, complete with a punching bag that now features a very tasteful photo of Randall's face. The yoga room, storage for tools and tractor parts, that over-designed reading lounge with the fake fireplace. Now my farm office, complete with a mounted deer head and a Keurig machine. The koi pond. I stocked it with catfish. As for the residents whose houses had crept over my boundary line, well, they now pay fair market rent to me. One guy tried to negotiate by offering me lifetime access to his wine cellar. I told him I was more of a beer and barbecue man, but he's welcome to bring a bottle when he comes by to pay the rent each month. I even renamed the former HOA Greenbelt. It's now called Harper's Free Range and Fellowship Park. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? But the best part came a month later when I hosted my first annual No HOA Backyard BBQ and Freedom Fest. I set up tents, hauled out a dozen picnic tables, got 3 smokers going, and invited every farmer, rancher, fence fixer, and decent neighbor from 10 counties over. Even the judge showed up. Paige brought her famous jalapeno cornbread, and the journalist from Dallas Tribune brought a drone just to take overhead shots of the liberated clubhouse. I wore an apron that said, HOA this. And right in front of the old clubhouse sign, I installed a new one, carved in oak, polished by hand. It read, 1,000 acres of Matt Harper, no HOA, just ownership. And just below, in smaller letters, and 300 acres donated by Randall Jameson, much obliged. Now, if you're wondering about Randall, last I heard, he moved to a condo in the city. Word is he tried to join the building's HOA board and was politely told to stick to recycling duty. Justice, my friends, is poetic. Since the trial, things have been peaceful. My gates stay locked, my cows stay fed, and no one dares sneak onto my land with a clipboard again. But every so often, I'll catch sight of a new real estate flyer featuring prestigious communities adjacent to historic farmland. I laugh, shake my head, and toss it in the fire pit. See, they thought I was just some old-school farmer standing in the way of progress. But turns out, I was the landowner they shouldn't have messed with. And I've got a sauna, a catfish pond, and a $1.2 million reminder to prove it.